So, for people that love history, there are great books out there. There are documentaries out there. But one of the best ways to experience history is to go to the places where it happened and experience it for yourself. And we have a guest tonight on Hornet History that has made these places and interpreting the history at these places one of his life missions. We are honored to have Stephen McKee, who is a fellow compatriot in the Mecklenburg chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution, and also happens to be our current state president of the Society, North Carolina Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure to be here, and it's good to see you on I guess it's a Monday night here in the Old North State.
That's right. Right at the beginning of 2026, when we are celebrating our nation's 250th. It's a big year for the SAR. So Stephen has got a great background. Stephen is a fellow veteran from the Navy. He served as a submariner on a nuclear submarine, the USS Key West. And after that, went to work here in the Charlotte region with Duke Energy. And you've been with Duke for 18 plus years, know how to handle a nuclear reactor, and now is an instructor. And when he's not doing that, he is spending many, many weekends and many events representing the Sons of the American Revolution around the Carolinas and the nation, and particularly with reenactment, living history events. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
So, as a fellow compatriot, you have to have an ancestor that you have a direct lineage to that served in the American Revolution. Can you tell us about your ancestor?
I can, and I'm actually gonna tell you about two. I have more than one. Certainly, I joined the Sons of the American Revolution under a gentleman by the name of Moses Granberry. He was from the Virginia area, and he moved down to the New Bern district, and family lore gets kind of interesting. So he was either part of the Patriot forces that helped burn down Norfolk in 1775-76, or he moved to New Bern just prior to that, and then took part in the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge as part of the Patriot militia force that fought at Moores Creek Bridge. So he was a farmer, grew up in the Tidewater area of Virginia, or at least, I guess, lived in the Tidewater area of Virginia, and then moved to North Carolina. And really, when the war got started, he spent most of his time in the New Bern district with that militia, marching to and fro in North Carolina. Now, I do have another Patriot ancestor that I still need to prove, and fellow compatriot Roy Lightfoot will get a kick out of it. And of course, he knows that we may be related now, but I have an ancestor, at least that, from the best research we can do, shows on my tree he was a lieutenant in the Continental Artillery, and it just so happens that my living history or reenactment career ties to those two gentlemen in kind of an interesting way. So I attended a lot of events as a spectator for a number of years before I got involved. The first reenactment that I did as a participant rather than a spectator was in the American militia at Moores Creek Bridge in 2020. And so that ties back to Moses Granberry and his potential for his first fight being at Moores Creek Bridge. And in my current role with Kingsbury's North Carolina Artillery, I'm a lieutenant in that artillery regiment. And I've got a Lightfoot ancestor who was also a lieutenant in the Continental Artillery during the American Revolution. So it's interesting to see when you start pulling those threads of history and really the personal threads, how quickly your own life kind of intermeshes with your own history to make it that much more meaningful when you get out there on the field and have a good time. So
absolutely. So you joined the SAR and quickly moved up the ranks. You were president of the Mecklenburg chapter a few years ago. Then you moved up into state leadership, led the color guard for the state, senior vice president, and now president. And we're certainly excited to see where it may go from here. Your passion for living history. We're in a really good spot. for that, right?
We
In
are.
Charlotte. I mean, so much of the American Revolution, especially in the you talk about Morris Creek and in the early days of the Revolution, but then the later years, the pivotal turning points of the Revolution with Kings Mountain and the Battle of Guilford Courthouse and so many others, to for people living in our area in the Carolinas, there's a ton of that kind of history that they can go and experience, right? Could you take us through a typical year, and especially this year, 2026, with the 250th being celebrated? Could you just kind of walk us through the highlights of the opportunities that people that are interested in learning more about the history of the American Revolution, where they can start?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, 2026, it's 250 years from 1776. And there's a lot of pivotal history that takes place in the Carolinas and in even Georgia and Virginia, especially, that really starts early in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then the war tends to shift pretty far north for a while. We kick most of the royal governors out very early, 1775, 1776, and really established Whiggish, or what we would call patriots today, control of our states. And they certainly tried to regain royal control of the Carolinas and Georgia, but it really wouldn't happen for a number of years. But so what I'll do is, instead of talking necessarily January through December, I'm going to start with the 250th events for North Carolina first.
Sure.
We absolutely did the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence 250th last year on May 20th. And that was really the first county, or the first people of British North America, that said, hey, we've had enough. We're done. It's reconciliation may be good for the rest of you, but as far as those of us in Mecklenburg, we are done with royal authority and we've declared our independence. And so that becomes the first, I guess, block in North Carolina's claim to be first in freedom. If you look at our state flag, that date that's on the top above NC says May 20th, 1775, and that's that MECDEC date.
Right.
Then you have the 250th of the Mecklenburg Resolves on May 31st, and then we continued to move through the year, and two big events are happening in North Carolina this year that are really our 250th events. So you have the Battle of Morris Creek Bridge, which I just talked about. The last weekend in February, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of Morris Creek Bridge. And really what happened there, we had run the royal governor out of North Carolina. He was out on a British ship, the HMS Cruiser. They were attempting to reestablish royal control of North Carolina. And so some of the troops, British troops, sailed to North Carolina. They were going to make a port call in Wilmington, and the loyalists from the state had been called in to join up with those troops at the coast, and then they were going to march through and pacify North Carolina early in the period of rebellion, right? The Declaration of Independence itself has not been even hinted at in February of 76, other than the MECDEC, telling Congress, hey, we're ready to go. But what happens there is the Loyalist Scots from Cross Creek, which is now Fayetteville, North Carolina, started their march. Patriot militia gets word about it, and so they begin to march and follow them, and they meet up at the old Widow Moore's Bridge there in the swamps just west of Wilmington. It's a really quick fight. It's the last Scottish charge with broadswords that takes place in modern or semi-modern warfare, if you will. And the loyalist Scots are routed by many of their fellow Scots countrymen that are just of a different political persuasion. Happens early in the morning in the fog. Lots of men are killed and or drowned in the creek. And that 250th anniversary is coming up against last week in February this year. It's going to be several days coordinated between the state, the SAR, DAR, CAR, living historians, historic sites, America 250 NC. All these groups are going to get together and really celebrate that battle for a couple of days.
And that's in
the next
Curry, North Carolina, right?
It is in Curry, North Carolina. So it is still, again, just west of Wilmington. If you come to the battle site, the state historic site, or actually it's a National Historic Site, you can see the remnants of the actual earthworks that the Patriots had built some earthworks and piled a bunch of brush up to hide behind. It's not the original bridge, but you can kind of see where that original bridge was, and you can look at that swampy area and get an idea of kind of what it would have been like, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, sun's not up, foggy, trying to cross a bridge that the planks have been removed from, and that those runners had been greased in the dark over a swamp into the teeth of cannon and musket fire. So it'll give you a good perspective on early in the war when people were still really deciding which way they were going to go. That people felt strongly enough to fight about it. And the one thing about Moores Creek Bridge is it really, because it's such a resounding defeat for the Loyalists, it kind of tamps down a lot of Loyalist fervor in the state, really up until the Southern campaign really kicks off in 79 and 80, to re-engage those militia on a mass level to get them back involved. The next 250th event is going to be in April. It'll be the weekend of April 12th. And if you look at the bottom date on the North Carolina flag, it says April 12th, 1776, and that's the date of the Halifax Resolves. And this is that second block that really solidifies North Carolina's place as first in freedom. We were the first state to direct our delegates at the Continental Congress, hey, if an independence vote comes up, North Carolina is in for independence. So there's going to be, again, several days with the State Historic Site, the SAR, DAR, CAR, living historians, to where you'll get a feeling of what that Fourth Provincial Congress was about, and really the ideas that were being put forth, that now it's no longer a matter of reconciliation and a recognition of our rights as Englishmen so much as we are now completely starting to turn away from the mother country and really look for that independence moment. One of the highlights that we hope to have is, as part of the 250th anniversary Congress that the SAR is hosting in Greensboro in July next year, the North Carolina Society SAR has commissioned a painting of the Halifax Resolves, and there's not a lot of those, if any, out there of the Halifax Resolves. We've engaged historic artist Dan Nance out of Charlotte, and I've seen the sketches and the ideas, and man, it is going to be an impressive painting, and we're hoping to kind of do a soft release or a unveiling at the 250th anniversary of the Halifax Resolves to really highlight North Carolina history in the early war period. And there's a lot of little skirmishes that took place shortly thereafter, but really those are the two big 250th events that take place in North Carolina. That'll give you.
Halifax is east of Raleigh.
It is. So Halifax is east of Raleigh, and it's probably an hour from the Virginia border. The beautiful thing about Halifax is, if you've ever been to Colonial Williamsburg or Old Salem, Halifax is really similar to that, just smaller. So there's still a lot of historic buildings, 18th century, some 19th century buildings that are kind of mixed in with the 20th century town that exists now. But there's going to be hundreds of reenactors out there portraying local militias, townspeople. Because remember, the Continental Army doesn't exist in the South so much yet, right? You've had Lexington and Concord in 1775, and you've had Bunker Hill in 1775 up north. And so there's a Continental Army because Congress has adopted the Massachusetts or the New England militia as the Continental Army. But really, a lot of the rest of the colonies haven't completely put themselves on a war footing. In 75, North Carolina had split ourselves into 6 militia districts, but really that Fourth Continental Congress that happens in April and May of 1776 really gets those militias in motion. North Carolina troops did fight at the Battle of Great Bridge in Virginia in December of 75, but they're back in North Carolina by early 1776. So those are the two big 250th events.
And it's exciting that Dan Nance is painting up.
Oh, yes. And again, having seen the sketch that has come together with input from the SAR and the DAR on this, it's going to be a magnificent painting like all of his stuff is, and it's going to be something that the North Carolina SAR can give to the state and really the nation to celebrate North Carolina's preeminent role, right? Leading role
Yeah,
in the push for independence.
that's fantastic. And if our
Oh, yeah.
viewers don't know who Dan Nance is, you need to look this guy up. He is just a treasure and such a talent here in Charlotte, and his paintings of historical events through our nation's history are just fantastic. We need to get him on the show, but keep trying.
We do. And in fact, you might want to do it at his gallery in Charlotte. He's got a lot of paintings and a lot of dioramas, and it is an event unto itself to go visit Dan in his natural habitat down at his gallery in Charlotte.
Absolutely. So throughout the year, what are the events that are just can't miss events in the Carolinas, other than the two big ones that we're going to have huge celebrations on? Where can folks go?
Okay, so big picture, it's going to happen all throughout the year. Mm-hmm. We're in January 2026. We've got two pretty big events coming up in January. This weekend coming up, it's I guess it's January 17th, 18th, and 19th is going to be the Battle of Cowpens. That's not a battle that doesn't happen until later in the war, once the Southern campaign has really ramped in. But every year at Cowpens National Battlefield and just across the border in Blacksburg, South Carolina, we celebrate the Battle of Cowpens. And it's not going to be a full-on reenactment, but we'll have a commemoration this year. General George Washington and his wife Martha will be special guests. So if you've never met George Washington and Martha, that's an experience in and of itself. But there'll be a living history and encampment, and what it'll do is it'll give you kind of a taste in how armies of the time period, both American and British, would have lived during the period that the Battle of Cowpens took place. So you'll see some canvas tents that would represent what a small portion of an army camp would look like. But conversely, there were some units, especially on the British side, that had burned their tents and baggage to make that army move much quicker in order to really catch the American army and engage them in the field, that they'll be in brush shelters and things that they've constructed out of things they just pulled out of the woods. And there's some guys that may just have their wool blanket roll and they're sleeping on the bare ground. And if you've never been in Cowpens in January, Cowpens cold is a different kind of cold. It might say 40 or 45 or even 50 on the thermometer, and you get down there and the wind and the humidity, it's that gets to your bones kind of cold every year.
So dress warmly
in January. So dress warmly, yes. 2 weeks later, we do have the commemoration of the 245th anniversary of the Battle of Cowan's Ford. And so for those of you that are Charlotteans or in the triad, I guess, as Cornwallis's army had marched north out of South Carolina and into North Carolina, this is a battle that takes place right on the Lincoln County and Mecklenburg County line, right on the Catawba River. And so if you know where McGuire Nuclear Station is or Cowan's Ford Dam, that's the battlefield. Now it's behind a fence now because it's part of the protected area for McGuire Nuclear Station. But that's where Cornwallis crossed the Catawba River as he was pursuing General Nathaniel Greene at really the beginnings of the race to the Dan. We'll be commemorating that at Hopewell Presbyterian Church on Saturday, January 31st. We've got a great speaker coming in. The last several years, we've really tried to tell not so much what happened at Cowan's Ford as the why. And one of the big things about history that's so important is the why, right? We can recite names and dates and talk about battles and statistics of battles and what happened, but we have to remember that history is really the story of people, right? History is the story of us. And when you look at it that way, when you look at it as they were men and women and children just like us, fathers, mothers, sons, brothers and sisters who were making decisions in real time for them, right? We have the benefit of hindsight knowing if they chose wisely or chose poorly, but they were making the same kinds of decisions that we make day in and day out, really just trying to make their life the best it could be. And so by going to that why, what would cause someone who probably had lots of better things to do, right? I could be farming, I could be getting up the chickens, I could be selling things, I could be going up the Great Wagon Road to Philadelphia to buy trade goods and bring them back to Charlottetown and sell them to the people so they don't have to make clothes and things like that. But what would motivate people to then say, no, 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 I have all these things I should be doing, but what I have to do is stand and fight in really terrible conditions and see it all the way through, because my rights and the freedom of me, my children, millions of Americans yet unborn, right, depends on me doing this. And so we've got a gentleman coming down from Colonial Williamsburg. He's portraying Gowan Pamphlet, who was the first ordained Black minister in Virginia. And he's going to come down and really show that the cause itself, whether we realized it perfectly or not in 1776 or not, it really becomes the cause of all mankind, right? It's the idea that we are all created equally by God, that God's given us all rights that are inalienable or inseparable from our humanity. And that among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And really, the only reason governments exist is basically to safeguard those rights, right? And only rule through our consent if we say it's okay. And so it's important, especially now where we're so just politically divided, to hearken back to the idea that we do have a core set of values that lets us wear the title of American. Not white American, not Black American, not American comes with a certain set of core values. And it's really those 55 words from the Declaration of Independence. And so he's going to come and kind of highlight that is, in fact, the cause of all mankind. And even in 1776, before we perfectly realized what that would mean, that people were already thinking it, right? These ideas were not new, but they were congealing at a time when the limits of freedom didn't seem quite as, rigid as they did in the monarchical times in which we were emerging from. So it's going to be an exciting event. Come out to it. There's an indoor portion where Gowan Pamphlet will speak, and then we'll retire to the cemetery for a rendering of honors, really honoring the men and women who sacrificed at the Battle of Cowan's Ford. Then I've already mentioned Moores Creek Bridge is the big one for February. March, Guilford Courthouse is going to be the weekend of March 15th. That's the date that Guilford Courthouse took place in 1781. Always a big reenactment, always an interesting reenactment, because it's a little bit different. Instead of being right up in the middle of the action of what happened, spectators stand basically at the third American line. And so when the battle commences, you can't even see it. You can hear it. And you can hear it get closer and closer. And then you begin to see the first line retreating through the trees to the second line. And the battle, again, erupts and they start fighting. And then you see as the British push through that second American line as it collapses down into the third line. And then you get the finale there that's close enough for you to really kind of see the action, smell the action, hear the action. And so that's a really good estimation of what a small portion of that battle would have looked like in the 18th century. And it takes place on ground that probably was part of the battlefield in 1781. Already mentioned Halifax in April. May, it's going to be MECDEC again, right? We did 250 last year. 251 at MECDEC is still a good time. Come down to downtown Charlotte at Trade and Tryon. Where else are you going to get to see muskets and cannons fired in downtown Charlotte? And the police just stand by and say, man, that was cool. It's a good time. And again, the more you know about the area, right? Charlotte gets this reputation of having no culture. We've got lots of culture. You just have to come out and learn about it. Let's see. That's May. June is going to be the Battle of, I'm going to say Ramsers Mill will be early in June.
Lincolnton, North Carolina.
Lincolnton, North Carolina. Very consequential battle. So this is one where there's a lot of folks that live in Lincolnton that don't realize one of the most consequential battles of the Revolutionary War took place just outside of town, and there were no British present. It was Americans versus Americans, those who wished to stay loyal to the king and those who wished for independence. And that community fought a really vicious, brutal battle, about 3 hours worth of battle that took place. As they ran out of ammunition, they resorted to physical hand-to-hand violence. And it's a very moving tribute to the 70 people that are buried in a mass grave there by the elementary school that We don't know how many loyalists, how many Whigs or patriots are in that grave. We just know that they were all neighbors, brothers, fathers, and sons that are now at rest together after fighting there in June of 1780. So,
And our last guest, Dee Bradford, a compatriot of ours, had an ancestor at that battle.
and that's another beautiful thing about genealogy is you'll find connections to some of these historic places that makes the energy that you feel at some of them just kind of make more sense when you're like, I've always kind of felt funny here. But now that I have a personal connection and you walk the same ground your ancestors did, it's a pretty heady kind of experience.
Family history. That's
Oh,
right.
yeah. All right. So now we're moving on to July 2026. Need I say more? It is the 250th. Independence Day, obviously on the 4th. There's going to be all kinds of big things on July 4th. So there's parades in Faith, North Carolina, one of the biggest July 4th parades in the nation. It's 40,000 spectators every other year. So I can only imagine how massive the Faith 4th of July parade is going to be in 2026. And that's Faith, North Carolina. It's just outside of Salisbury, a little east. Wonderful, wonderful parade. You'll see all kinds of American history in that parade and probably throughout the Carolinas and really the nation, parades, barbecues, all kinds of fun things. Excuse me. On July 3rd, the Celebrate America Foundation, which I happen to be the chairman of now, is having a huge patriotic concert. It's going to be free admission. Details are still emerging as to who's going to be there, when, where, and how. There'll be free tickets, but it's also going to be broadcast live by PBS in North Carolina, and it'll be available to watch on PBS throughout the 250th time frame. And one thing to keep in mind, the Revolutionary War was eight long years, so we've really got about a decade of the Revolution that's celebrating its 250th, starting in 2023 all the way out to 2033. So there's lots and lots of fun stuff coming, but really July 4th is also going to have things like naturalization ceremonies for new citizens. And if you've never been to a naturalization ceremony, it will make you feel something as an American, something you were born to, that maybe you don't give a whole lot of second thought to. When you see tears in people's eyes.
That's great, man.
For finally being able to say, I am an American. And it lets you know that despite squabbles, despite the animated and passionate arguments that those of us who were born American and have never thought twice about being American really see it in their face. You talk to folks who've put in a lot of work to do something that we've got from birth, is really an impactful kind of ceremony. And there'll be things like that happening on July 4th. And could you imagine becoming an American on July 4th?
Awesome.
The 250th anniversary,
oh,
right?
Goodness.
It makes that July 4th ceremony even bigger.
For sure.
Then there's also the House on the Horseshoe, which is a battle that happens late in North Carolina. It'll be late in July, or maybe even pushing into August.
Kind of that area.
It is. It's out near Sanford and that area. It may actually even be in August. But lots and lots of things. The state historic site there is getting a brand new visitor center.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it'll be. I don't think it's happening in 2026 because the visitor center is being built. But that's one to keep in mind for August. Going forward, September, or actually, you know what, for August, I'll mention there's a big living history event that's going to be taking place at the Museum of the Waxhaws. It'll be the Battle of Charlotte down at the Museum of the Waxhaws. Really good time there. Come out and see it. It's a wonderful museum that shows you the history of the Waxhaws itself, but there'll be a lot of living historians out there really showing what the Battle of Charlotte looked like. And then we also do what's known as the Battle of the Bees or McIntyre's Farm, which was a foraging party of Brits that went outside of Charlotte and they were raiding a home. And the homeowners had beehives basically for purposes of keeping crops. They kicked it over, the bees attacked them, and then the American militia showed up and attacked them on top of the bees. And we did it for the first time at the Museum of the Waxhaws last year, and it turned out really well. And I'll see if I can't find that footage on YouTube to send your way, or maybe you can put a link in to get a good idea.
another one of Dee Bradford, our last guest, of his 35 ancestors from the Revolution was at the Battle of
Oh,
McKee.
wow.
So
And
really cool.
it's one of those things that lets you know that regular people, right? It's not just George Washington and Horatio Gates and Nathaniel Greene and Charles Cornwallis and General Howe. It's not just the names I'll say that we all know or that we should know. It was ordinary people that said, you know what, this is happening in my neighborhood and I'm not going to put up with it. So,
and as I understand it, Mecklenburg County is restoring that site in the coming months with Kendall Kendrick, and we'll be able to come and visit and have interpretation of that site.
oh yeah,
There on Beatty's Ford Road, just north of Charlotte. So it's a lot of exciting things happening here locally.
it is. And Kendall had an ancestor that was there.
Yes, and we're getting close to Camden.
What's
at
that?
This point, are we getting close to Camden at this point in the calendar?
We are. So the Battle of Camden actually takes place in August, but the reenactment itself is in November every year.
A little warm down there in Camden, South Carolina.
It is. And I will tell you, even in November in South Carolina, it can still be a little warm in a wool coat for the Battle of Camden reenactment. But it allows the spectators to see the Battle of Camden. And one of the beautiful things about the site, it's in Kershaw, South Carolina, and where it used to be at historic Camden by the Kershaw House, and it's a beautiful site. That's not so much a historically accurate site for the battle. So just north of Camden in Kershaw is a farm or a rural piece of property that really, it's the longleaf pine forest, right? It looks exactly like the battlefield. It's just outside of Camden. And it gives us 300-400 yards to play with. So we're engaging each other at reasonable ranges, right? So that you get a feel for movement of troops, when they would have started shooting, and really, so it doesn't start, you don't start packing the sides in where it doesn't look like scenes out of The Patriot where you're standing 10 feet apart, just mowing each other down with musket fire. Wonderful site. We also on Sunday that weekend do a different battle in the Carolinas that took place, or it could even be a battle that didn't take place in the Carolinas, but the ground that we have lets you see a different part of the war. Another good thing about Camden, there's sutlers at all of the reenactors, and all the sutler is a vendor that sells period stuff, clothes, toys, hats, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Camden every year is a huge sutler event where you get a lot of larger sutlers all in. And really, if you're looking to put on some 18th century clothes, and I'll tell you, once you've worn them as much as I have, they're more comfortable than modern clothes. If your wife has an Outlander fantasy that you want to satisfy as a romantic endeavor between husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend, get you some 18th century clothes, both of you. And it's a big time, and it gives you a chance to, again, you can see and you can smell. You can't taste for liability reasons, right? But you kind of get a feel for what 18th century camp life was really like. And one of the interesting things that happens in Camden every year is the British camp celebrates Guy Fawkes Night. So for those who don't know, Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the British Parliament, right? Kill the Protestant monarchy to restore Catholicism and a Catholic king to England, and he failed. And so England celebrates Guy Fawkes Day every year. We do the same thing down in Camden. The British lead a big procession with Guy Fawkes. They read the charges, they read the poem, they put him on a pyre, they burn him in effigy just the same way they do in England. And it really gives you kind of an authentic British feel for the camp. So it's a good time and well worth coming out to.
Wow. What else through the year? What are we missing?
Let's see.
Kings Mountain's a big one coming up in October.
Kings Mountain's a big one. It's in South Carolina. It's October 7th every year at the National Park. That's a big commemorative event. There's not so much a reenactment that takes place there. There's special rules that come with reenacting
on the grounds of the national.
It is. It's it'll take place at the Victory Monument that's up there on the ridge where Patrick Ferguson's force was soundly defeated by militiamen from the Carolinas, Virginia, some Georgians, and what is now in modern Tennessee that was North Carolina and Virginia at the time. So Kings Mountain is a big one to go to, and that's one that when Hurricane Helene came through, it devastated that park pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And that event was canceled. And then earlier this year, we had the government shutdown to deal with. And so the park was closed yet again. But our compatriot brothers down in South Carolina were absolutely not going to be deterred for 2 years in a row. And they moved it to Spartanburg. We had a big ceremony at a park in Spartanburg. And this year is North Carolina's turn to host that event. And so it's going to be a big time, and we're going to have a great time with Kings Mountain. A week after Kings Mountain is Shallow Ford, North Carolina. It was the last gasp or last big gasp of Loyalist sentiment that took place in 1780, where another 900 Loyalists were basically trying to cross the Yadkin River at Shallow Ford, and they were ambushed, and a lot of them were killed and driven from the field. And so it prevented really Cornwallis from getting any reinforcements in late 1780 and 1781 through Guilford Courthouse, which then drives him to Wilmington. And then he can't really get resupplied at Wilmington, so he then marches to Yorktown. And so really that last handful of months in the Carolinas, we're the first in freedom, but we're also the place where the revolution was won and independence was secured, simply because it was here. It was a war of attrition. It was a civil war. It really was a civil war here in the Carolinas and Georgia. And we ground the British machine down to where it could no longer wage offensive war, and found itself sitting on the Yorktown Peninsula, really waiting for evacuation. The French show up, right, beat the Royal Navy, the Battle of the Capes, and trap Cornwallis, Washington, and the French army sweep down and trap him by the land. The French have got him bottled up by sea. And then we force his surrender in October of 1781. So October 19th is another big event just across the northern border into the Old Dominion for the Battle of Yorktown, and really secure the independence of these United States. So lots of good things happened in the Carolinas to get us there.
What's an event that you haven't been to? Because you've been to dozens and dozens and probably hundreds of these events over the years. What are some of the events further afield, maybe Northern Theater or Georgia or other places? What's one or two that you haven't been to, but you would love to go?
So with this being 1776, technically, in the 250th timeline, we're certainly looking, because again, we talked about Moores Creek Bridge and Halifax, and really everything dies down in the South on a large scale for several years. But North Carolina troops in 76 and 77 marched north. So we're looking at things like the Battle of Brandywine, the Battle of Princeton, going to Valley Forge for, 2027 in the winter at Valley Forge. Yeah. Kingsbury's artillery that I'm a part of was at Valley Forge during the original encampment when they had marched north. Things around like Fort Ticonderoga in New York, and the Battle of Brooklyn is coming up this year. That after Trenton and Princeton in late 1776, or prior to Princeton and Trenton. Right, the Americans had been driven out of New York, so you had the driving them out of Boston and then getting beat across New York and all the way across New Jersey into Pennsylvania, and then crossing the Delaware. Right, the 250th of the crossing of the Delaware is Christmas this year, and I don't know that I'll be there on Christmas this year, as cool as that would be. But doing a crossing, where they crossed from New Jersey. I've been to the park. And it's a magnificent place that you can look at and you can kind of visualize it. And it would be great if it was snow and ice choked.
Oh my God!
But there's lots of opportunities in the North that North Carolina troops absolutely participated in, and we are looking at those events and really networking with other reenactment groups in the SAR and DAR north of the Mason-Dixon to get to those events and really celebrate those 250th anniversaries in a way that not only would honor our ancestors, right, but really make history real for the American people more than a textbook or even a movie could make that history.
Right. So quickly, if you go to one of these events, one of our viewers goes, they're either a fellow compatriot or someone that's interested in history, and they decide they want to get involved. Where do they start?
So the big thing to do is there's lots of websites and even Facebook. So if you're interested in living history, especially, the first thing I would recommend you do is decide kind of what you want to do. Do you want to be a militiaman? Do you want to be an artilleryman? Do you want to be, do you own horses and do you ride horses? And would you like to be a dragoon or light cavalry? And then the first place you need to start is find a unit. And I would recommend you do that. And if you're in the SAR color guard, recognize that depending on the unit that you select, your color guard uniform may not be okay or historically accurate for that unit. So you find that unit. Most units have loaner garb or they have clothing, equipment that you can borrow in a short-term basis to kind of dip your toe into the living history world and get an idea of whether you fit that unit and whether that unit fits you, right? Because just like any group of people, you get sort of a personality that comes with that group. And either it fits with where you're wanting to go with your living history journey or it doesn't. And it's okay. And you can move on to the next group. So contact them via Facebook or their websites online. Go to an event. Most of them have contact information and will take yours and get in touch with you. And really, if you go to that event and you see the different things that happen, it'll give you an idea of what you can chase after. Once you've dipped your toe in, typically they're going to give you their standards and they're going to tell you what clothes are acceptable and which ones are not. And so it gives you a way to not spend hundreds or thousands of dollars that is worthless, right? One thing I would tell folks, I would encourage folks, man, if you've got a beard, hope you're not attached to it. In the 18th century, men were clean shaven. It's the age of enlightenment.
Yep.
Cleanliness and hygiene was seen as a way to show you were an enlightened person, and it didn't matter if you were a militiaman from over the mountains in the backcountry on the frontier, or if you lived in New Bern or New York or Charlestown, you shaved your face. And in fact, there's I guess journal entries and there's news stories where guys who didn't shave their face were seized by the men of the town and forcibly shaved. And there are even some gravestones, of men who lived in the 18th century that are carved with the town shaved his face. So get that in mind, and also recognize that it's buy once, cry once, right? Get the right stuff, and you can enjoy really a fruitful career in living history. And I'll tell you, there's things that you will pick up doing living history that you may have thought about, but you didn't think about it in terms of the experience. We talked about the big event down in Camden in November every year. At night, after the site closes and all the spectators go home, there's no street lights, there's no light pollution out there. If you stand back from the camp and you just look through the camp, it's lit by candle lanterns, campfires. You can hear 18th century music being played. You can hear the folks in the tavern tent area singing 18th century songs and having a jovial time. And it takes you back to where it's probably not exactly the same because we're all well fed and we've got, decent clothes on and, we're not freezing to death. We're not emaciated, but it gives you a sense of what camp life might have been like for an army that wasn't directly under threat. You get to sample food. I know in our unit, we cook period recipes. So you don't eat pizza or KFC or cheeseburgers at these events. For us, you might have, beef collops with a cream mushroom sauce.
Ooh.
And that's just thinly sliced steaks that's in this cream mushroom sauce. We've done Carolina snowballs, which are an amazing dessert dish that took place in period that because we grew rice so much in the Carolinas back then, it utilizes rice. And so you experience the sounds and the sights. And this is the place where you get to taste history. And it's amazing to where we think of our ancestors as so simplistic and so unsophisticated maybe. And we find out that their palates were just as sophisticated as ours. They ate really well if they had the supplies to eat really well. And you get an appreciation for what early Americans went through. In 2022, at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse reenactment, we call it the Four Seasons Guilford. because on Friday night when we set up, it was about 70 degrees and sunny. We had a cold front roll through Friday night. Lightning strikes in camp. Trees came down. And we woke up in the morning on Saturday morning. It was 40 degrees at 6 in the morning. That's the warmest it was going to be all day.
Oh.
By 9 in the morning, it was 15 or 16 degrees with 40 knot winds and snowing. And you would think wearing 3 layers to include a wool jacket, you'd be fine. You'd be wrong when it gets that cold. And by 5:30 that evening, everybody had eaten dinner and everybody's shivering, trying to get hot soup in their face. We were all in the tents, and a lot of units went and got hotels that night. Kingsbury's is one of the 3 or 4 that stayed. And it's funny because when you talk to everybody, we were all huddling in the tents trying to stay warm. And it was, for me, it was, if my ancestor could do this for 8 years with no pay, no food, no jacket, maybe not a blanket, no stockings or shoes. Man, I got all this modern stuff in here to keep me warm, and I'm I can hack it for a weekend. But there's also well, if Tom's not leaving, I'm not going to be the one. But if he comes and tells me he wants to go to a hotel, I'll take him to a hotel. But in the next 10 over, Tom's going, well, if Steve's staying, I'm not going to be the one. And I mean, it took 45 minutes in a sleeping bag with the hand warmers down to where your feet stopped or started to hurt again, where they weren't numb anymore. They started to hurt again. I woke up on Sunday morning and I had some thigh length gaiters, which just kind of protect your stockings and your shoes from getting stuff down in them. And they had gotten wet because they had soaked up water all day and they were frozen solid. Like I could have snapped them over my knee. But it's things like that afterwards, right? That you look back and hey man, I did that. And no, it's not 8 long years of fighting. It's not, dysentery and yellow fever and smallpox and all that.
Yeah.
But it gives you a remarkable appreciation for really people who had a lot less making consequential decisions to give us the life that we enjoy now. And it puts it into a perspective in a way that I wish every American could experience at least once. Because I think if we knew the sacrifices and the hardships that really all Americans suffered during the Revolutionary period, I think we would have less venom in our voice when we talk to each other. We would have less anger towards each other. When we recognize that core set of values that make us Americans, I think we would be willing to rededicate ourselves to that and see if that common ground that we do have is really worth fighting for the next 250 years. And I personally believe it is. I think if we could all agree that we're all created equal by God, that we all have rights that He's given us that are free from any interference from temporal authority, and that the reason governments exist is to protect those rights, I think we've got a good shot at the next 250 years. And Lord, I hope so. And living history is a good way to kind of figure out that this exceptional country that we call home is truly worth fighting for, and in the peaceful means in which this founding generation gave us, to where we don't have to rehash the battles our ancestors went through, when we can, re-solidify our dedication to it at the ballot box. So,
not a better way to end than right there, man. Those are great words. Stephen, thank you for coming on Hornet History. This has been great.
I appreciate you having me.
I could keep going and talking here. Man, thank you for your time out there in that cold weather and making this history come alive to so many Americans. And we encourage people to go out and find these events. Take your kids, go out, make it a date weekend. Go and experience it. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for your service to the Sons of the American Revolution, our state president and beyond. So thank you very much.
We will see.
And it's a big year, and we're just getting rolling, man.
Absolutely. And if you need anything or anybody watching this has questions, feel free to reach out. We'll get you plugged in. And next thing you know, you'll be wearing stockings and garters as a regular part of your wardrobe. It'll be a good time.
Let's roll. I just bought mine. I'm ready to.
I know. That's what I'm saying. We're going to get you out there in the cold and we'll get you in the heat.
That's it. All right, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Blessings on you and your family and our great nation, man. We appreciate it.
To you and yours as well. Have a good night.
Thank you.